Hello, and thank you everybody for joining our last webinar series dedicated to maximizing your research impact. My name is Dr. Nargiza Ludgate, and I'm one of the leads of local capacity development cross-cutting team within the Feed the Future Innovation Lab at the University of Florida. We are really delighted to have you here. These live webinar series are funded by the Innovation Lab for Livestock Systems in collaboration with the University of Florida George S. Mathers Libraries. We launched, as Jim indicated earlier, we launched this series in March 2022. All 6 webinars have been focused on helping researchers, faculty, and students in our partner countries to increase scholarly profile and visibility in the digital age. As we all know, much of the activity these days takes place online. We as researchers store data online, communicate via email, and of course, read scholarly articles published online. But there is much more can be done online than just having data or the scholarly articles. And it is very important for researchers to control their own online presence. So when someone Googles your name, what do you want them to find out or to see? And that was the purpose of the webinar, to help researchers establish their online presence and build and expand on that and communicate the right information about themselves. So today's webinar is the last in the series and dedicated to the tools for managing your researcher profile. The speaker will give us another opportunity to learn about how to leverage Google Scholar, Dimensions, Scopus, and other online tools that are free and accessible to maximize your research presence online. Next slide, please. These webinars are led by Dr. Terry Kit Selfe, who is a translational research and impact librarian at the University of Florida. Dr. Selfe is an experienced clinical investigator with specific expertise in planning and execution of clinical trials involving mind-body therapies for chronic conditions related to aging and stress. She received a Doctor of Chiropractic degree from Palmer College of Chiropractic, a PhD in educational research from the University of Virginia, and she also completed a National Institute of Health funded postdoctoral fellowship in clinical research at the University of Virginia Center for Study of Complementary and Alternative Therapies. Before I give the stage to Dr. Selfe, I'd like to go and remind our guests about the housekeeping. We request all participants to keep your mics mute throughout the duration of this webinar. Please type your name, institution, and email in the chat. Recording and PowerPoint slides of this and all other webinars are being posted on the Innovation Lab's website. And my colleagues will be posting that throughout the duration of the webinar. Please use chat for comments and questions. And for our French-speaking colleagues, we translated the PowerPoint slides into French, and I believe someone already shared the link to those slides. You can download and follow them as you're listening to Dr. Selfe. And now, Dr. Selfe, passing this to you.
Hi, everyone. So welcome to the last session in the series. Today, as mentioned, we're going to be talking about researcher profiles. So we've already talked in previous sessions, we've talked about research metrics. We've had a couple of sessions on publishing. So we looked at choosing an appropriate journal, avoiding predatory journals, drafting a manuscript for submission, and then navigating that whole submission process. We also had a session where we talked about the ORCID ID. And then today we're going to wrap it up with looking at free researcher profiles, what they are, where to find them, and how and why you should create your own profile using at least one of those tools, if not more. So I'm going to go ahead. We'll get started. I'm going to turn off my camera, and here we go. So when I'm talking about a researcher profile, it's basically we're talking about your online scholarly identity. And there are multiple sources you can use to explore your profile. And they're the same sources we've already looked at when we were talking about research metrics. None of the profiles are comprehensive and cover every publication that you have. So that's why checking multiple profiles is likely going to be necessary. So just to review briefly, in case you've forgotten or you missed it, we talked about the standard metrics, and those tend to be based on how often something was cited. They can be categorized according to what they're being used to measure. So if you're interested in the impact of a particular article, you look at the item level metrics for that, like a citation count. And there are also metrics that reflect the impact of your whole body of work as a researcher. And an example of that would be the H index. So if you recall, we looked at metrics in dimensions. And for this article, let me get my pointer here. For this article in dimensions, it had 135 citations. Same article, same time, when it was looked up in Web of Science, it had 127 citations. And Web of Science is the database that the Publons profile uses for its metrics. Google Scholar, same article, same time, was cited by 180. And then Scopus, it was cited by 128. So each of those databases that had citation counts also provide researcher profiles. And just like the citation counts, your profile metrics are going to vary based on the database. And it's not just the counts for each citation in the profile that may differ, but the items themselves that are included in the profiles may differ. Each profile is only going to have items from items that it indexes, like journals, books, conference proceedings. And I do want to point out that ORCID, which we had a whole session on, creating your ORCID ID, that is something that you can use to track all of your publications. Actually, something I suggest you use to track all of your publications. However, ORCID does not include citation metrics. So we won't be looking at ORCID in today's lecture. If you want more info on setting up your ORCID ID, use the link from one of the, I think it was the second webinar in the series. Okay, so the first profile we're going to look at today is dimensions. And to find it, you can simply search the author's name. So if you're looking for someone else's profile, you can find it, or your own profile. Just do the author search, and then you can see once you've located the author you have in mind, there's a view profile link. So in that profile, dimensions includes information on the number of publications and the total citations.
Hello, miss. Can you hear me? I just joined.
Yes. Did you have a question? Okay, I guess they were just checking to make sure that they were here. So publications, also if you have data sets, grants, patents, clinical trials, the profile lists the counts for all of those things up at the top. And then if you scroll down the page, you'll see they list all of the publications, and they provide the citation metrics for each of those publications. They also list the co-authors as well as funding agencies. And if you scroll down a bit further in the profile record, they actually list the grants, data sets, and patents for the author. If you go back to the main search page where we clicked the profile link, you can click the little arrow in front of analytical views. And you can see under that analytical views, the researchers, they have a nice visualization of this author's co-author network. And all of this information was retrieved from the researcher's public profile in the free version of Dimensions. They compiled the information without requiring you to create a profile. The downside of that is you don't have any control over your own profile. So moving on to the Google Scholar profile. Looking up the same author, I can find some publications that he has authored. However, there is no profile listed. By way of contrast, if I search Google Scholar for myself, because I have a profile, I've created a profile in Google Scholar, it lists, just like the other author, it lists the publications, but it also has a link to my profile. And then in the Google Scholar profile, you get the basic metrics, number of citations, H-index, the number of articles. You actually have to scroll down in the publication list to see the grand total, which in this case was 37 publications. Scopus also has a profile, and you can do an author search to find that profile. Just enter the name, hit search, and then in this example, searching just the last name retrieved 5 author results. So you select the one that you're looking for, and Scopus provides the number of publications, total citations, and H index for that author. In the Scopus preview, which is their free version, the options are limited. So even though this is my profile, I switched over to my profile, but looking at that in Scopus preview, I can only see the most recent 10 documents in the profile. And if I had wanted to see who cited my articles, there would be a count, but that's all I could see is the count. In the paid version, I could click on that link and see the actual citing articles. You will not be able to do that in the free version. So there are some limitations to that profile. So moving on to Publons. If someone searches for you in Publons and you have not created a profile, they're going to retrieve no results. So you can see I did the search, I pulled up some, but none of them are the person I was searching for. On the other hand, if you have created a Publons profile and they do the search, there's a lot of information available in the public view. They provide a brief summary of the profile with the stats up top, number of publications, total citations, H index, pretty typical of the other profiles. Something unique to Publons is they also include the number of peer reviews you have conducted for journals. And you can see they've got the little summary link over at the left, where you can see the additional information. So we've got the most cited publications with the number of times each article was cited. And from here, you could hit the Go to Publications link to see the fuller list. Again, this is just the summary. Also in the summary view, here is the peer review summary. So they list each journal title that I've done a peer review for, and they give the number of articles I've reviewed for each of those journals. Moving on to the metrics section of Publons, they give you some graphics showing the publications by year and reviews by year. And note, they let you know that these citations, all these counts, are coming from articles indexed in the Web of Science core collection. Under the metrics view, they go on to provide some more detail about the peer reviews, showing how many were done per month, showing how your reviews compare to all reviewers or reviewers in your institution. So this is just showing I tend to be rather wordy in my peer reviews as compared to all reviewers and even compared to my colleagues at UF. Then under the publications heading, like with the peer reviews, they list the journal titles, in this case of every journal that I've published an article in, and they give the number of articles published by me in each of those journal titles. So again, this is, right now I'm looking at my record, but you could just as easily be looking at somebody else's record to get a sense of where they typically publish, any of the information that's available in their profile. So that being said, it could be someone else who's searching for information on you. And if you don't have, if you've not created a Publons profile, they're not going to find anything. If you have, then they'll have access to all of this information, as I say, in the public view. They can search this for free. So again, this is the whole list of publications with citation counts. And the peer review, which is, like I say, the thing that sets Publons apart from any of the other profiles, is they will track your peer reviews for you, so you get credit for them, and other people can see what you're doing in that realm as well. Now, if you've created your profile and you've logged in to Publons, you can go to the private dashboard and you can see additional information that is not available to the public. So logged in to Publons in the private dashboard, I can look at the citation map. And this gives a nice visual of where you're being cited. So this can be handy if you're going up for promotion or tenure and you want to be able to speak about your international reach. This gives you a nice graphic representation, and then you can zoom in and see more information on those. So you can click on one of the locations and then see all of the citations from that area. So as you've seen, there are multiple sources that you can use to explore your researcher profile. There is overlap in the types of metrics that they present. But as you saw, there are also some unique items in the various profiles. So you're probably going to want to create more than one. So why do you want any profile? But before we start creating more than one, why do you even want one? So as you saw in Google Scholar, it is easier for others to see what belongs to you. If they search your name in Google Scholar, if you haven't created a profile, they will see articles, but there is no profile like there is here. The other thing I want to point out, so there is a list of articles, but they may not all belong to this researcher because they've not created a profile. They're not managing that profile. So there could be some articles that pull up with this name search that don't actually belong to that author. Whereas with the profile, since I've created the profile, I can go in and make sure that all of these actually belong to me. The other way to get to the profile is if you just did the name search from the list. If you'll notice, this one, because there is no profile, the name is listed, but it is not underlined. In this example, my name is listed. It is underlined because I have a profile. So if I clicked on my underlined author name, that would also take me to my profile. So Google Scholar tries to make it easy for people to search for somebody and not only find their articles, but actually find their profile if they've created one. And then to demonstrate why you might want multiple profiles, these next slides, these are all going to be my profile taken at the same time, just so I can illustrate how they differ. So the Google Scholar profile shows 37 publications. One of them, at least, is a book chapter. This is an item type that won't necessarily show up in all profiles. So if you're specifically interested in book chapters, Google Scholar might be a good option for you. They also track some conference proceedings, and there's an example of that here. And you'll notice in Google Scholar, at the time I did this search, my H index was 20. In the Publons profile from the same time, this profile, I have 28 publications and an H index of 16. So you can see they're not all the same. Scopus, 30 publications with an H index of 16. So H index matches one of the others, but it's based on a different number of publications. And again, because it's the free Scopus account, you can only see the most recent 10 publications. So that's definitely a limitation. And then the dimensions showed the most publications at the time, 38 publications. However, the downside of dimensions, if you want an H index, they do not provide that. You can get it, but they don't just post the number for you. And I believe, I don't remember which webinar it was, but I showed you how you could, basically you just sort the list by the most cited and work your way down the list until you find the number of the publication that has at least that many citations. And that would be your H index. And again, to point out, Dimensions is another database that includes some book chapters. So this had one that actually was not included in Google Scholar. And Dimensions also has conference proceedings. So if those types of items are of interest to you, you're going to want to favor Dimensions. So when it comes to actually creating profiles, you don't need to do that in Dimensions. They compile and present all of the profile information. As an author, you do not need to create the profile. But as mentioned earlier, the downside to that is you don't have any control over the profile. And the same goes for Scopus. They create the Scopus profiles. It's automatically generated. But as the author, you cannot edit that. So no need to create a Scopus profile. However, Google Scholar, as we already showed, if you want a Google Scholar profile, you need to create that. And I've given you the URL to show you where to go to do that. I'm going to walk through these slides relatively quickly just to cover the content. So if there are people who are interested, but they don't want to try this in real time, you'll see what is in the slides and then you can try it on your own time. But if hopefully we'll have time at the end of this, that after I go through these quickly, we can go back, and if there are any of you that want to try any of this live, we can do that as well. So as for creating profiles, unlike the previous two, Google Scholar, as you saw earlier, is a profile that you need to create. And I've provided the link on the slide. This is where you go to set up your Google Scholar profile. You would just click on Create Account. If you have a Gmail account, you can use that. My preference is to use my institutional email account, in which case I would click here instead. And if you don't have a Gmail account that you want to use or an institutional account, you also have the option to create a new Gmail address. And then once you've created the account, to manage the profile, you go into Google Scholar, use the little menu icon on the left, and when you click on that, you get the little slider, and you can use the My Profile link or the Settings link to go in, see what your options are, and set it up the way you want it. The main thing you're going to want to do as far as managing the account is to go in, make sure all of the articles that are included in your profile actually belong to you. And that way, the metrics that you're collecting from your Google Scholar profile will be accurate. So moving on to the Publons profile, which also needs to be created. Again, I've provided the link to get you started. from this URL, you would just click on Create a Publons Profile. And you would then register for an account. Basically, they just want an email address and a password, your last name, first name. And once you've provided all of that, you'd hit the register button. If you happen to already have another account for a Clarivate product, like the Web of Science or EndNote, you could actually sign in using that account instead, and you would do that here. I'm assuming for most of you, the previous slide is going to be the one that you'll be using. So once you've created your account and logged into that account, you can go to the settings here. You can do the private dashboard or the settings link, which you'll see in the left-hand column, and go to the profile to add your profile information. You can see it's pretty basic. Name. If you have any alternate names, you can include those. And here we're showing if you went to it from the little ear icon, it would be the settings link. You can add any of your research fields of interest. Tell Publons how you want your profile displayed. In this example, we've got it set to allow others to see your alternative publishing names. I've got my default publication order as most cited. And then you just save the profile. You can go into affiliations and provide your institutional affiliation. You can also include information on any editorial board memberships that you have for journals or conferences. You can also, for institutional affiliations, if you have more than one affiliation here, you can add multiples. Just be sure to save the changes before going to the next area. In this case, we're just working our way down the list, which is to set up your email preferences. You just select or deselect however you want account updates and notifications to be communicated to you. And again, you would save the changes. Then under permissions, you're going to set up how you want your peer reviews to be acknowledged. So in this case, it's set to automatically add reviews from Publons partners. And then how you want that displayed, decide what your reviewer preferences are. You just click in any of these drop downs, find the one you want. and select it. The other thing you can do, which I highly recommend, is to link your Publons account to your ORCID account. And as you can see in this example of my account, that is exactly what I've done. I have linked it. You can also grant Publons permission to update your ORCID works. So any publications showing up in Publons can be added to your ORCID record. And you would grant Publons permission to do the update. So to then go and manage the items in your Publons profile after you've got it set up the way you want, you would go to the publications link in the left-hand column. And again, this is the important step to make sure that the metrics that you're using from Publons are accurate, that they're reflecting articles that actually belong to you and not someone else. And to add publications, you have some options. You can hit the Import Publications button and then select from the options they provide. For example, you can import from Web of Science. And they do provide complimentary access to Web of Science for Publons users for this purpose. In this example, my record was already complete, so there weren't any unclaimed publications of mine in Web of Science. But especially if you're setting this up for the first time, you may have items in Web of Science and you can just add them directly from here. Another option is to import the records from your ORCID account. And again, they give you the opportunity here to sync your publications from ORCID. And then to delete any publications that don't belong to you. If you pull up your profile and they've included some things that aren't yours, or you accidentally included something, it's as easy as looking at your publications list and just clicking on the little trash can icon. And they say you need to click that twice to delete that item. So those are the pretty basic instructions for creating and managing your profiles. And I just want to kind of summarize the things we've talked about in this session, and also draw on some of the things from previous sessions. So as I showed you today, there are multiple researcher profiles that are available. They draw their information from different databases. So not all of your publications will likely be covered in each profile, which means you're probably going to need to use multiple profiles in order to track everything. You can enter all of your publications in ORCID, which will help you with the tracking, but remember, ORCID does not provide citation metrics. So if you're using a profile specifically for the metrics, then you're going to need to be looking outside of ORCID. And if you find that one of these profile sources serves you better than others, if that's the one you prefer, know which database they're pulling their records from. And when you're choosing what journals to publish in, then favor journals that are indexed in that database. Explore the different metrics and identify which are the ones that best tell your story. Whether it's citation counts, like we've looked at today, as well as in other sessions, the normalized metrics that we talked about in the first session, alternative metrics. Again, we talked about those in more detail in the first session. So see what works for you, and it may differ based on the publication that you're wanting to say something about. And then if you're using multiple databases, see which of those are including the items. Remember, not all databases, not only do the metrics vary, but they also, their coverage varies. So there may be some articles that you want to say something about, but they're not covered in one of the profiles. So you need to go to the other profile to capture that. And whenever you're giving numbers, always provide the context. Don't just give the raw number. Give a description, put in words what that means. And because you're using multiple sources, you need to be naming your source. Where did you get that metric? And again, I want to stress, as I did in a previous session, that metrics are fine, but they don't tell the whole story. I recommend looking beyond the numbers, see not just how many times an article was cited, but who cited it, how was it used, and then highlight any that had some kind of impact that was particularly noteworthy. For example, if you had a publication that somebody cited because it actually informed some practice guidelines or it affected policy, those are the kinds of things that you really want to highlight. So that's it for the new content today. We covered some of the various profiles, what they are, where to find them, and why and how to create your own. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And please share the recording of this webinar and the others with your colleagues and students. And you can do that by sharing the link provided on this slide. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you found it worthwhile. Bye-bye.